I never thought the sound of a printer could shatter my world. But there I was, standing in our home office at 3 in the morning, holding bank statements that showed zeros where our life savings used to be. 47 years of marriage. Of scrimping and saving every penny. Of choosing generic brands and secondhand furniture so we could build something for our golden years. Gone. All of it. And the signature authorizing the withdrawal belonged to my own son. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The house felt different that morning, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold, staring at those bank statements spread before me, like evidence at a crime scene. The numbers didn't lie, even though I kept hoping they would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Our retirement fund, our emergency savings, even the modest college fund we'd started for our granddaughter Emma, all liquidated in a single day. My husband Robert was still asleep upstairs, his gentle snoring drifting down through the ceiling. At 72, he trusted that I handled our finances, trusted that our money was safe, trusted that our son Michael would never betray that faith. How was I going to tell him that trust had been shattered by the very person we'd raised to understand the value of honesty? The morning light crept through the kitchen blinds, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. I'd installed those blinds myself 15 years ago, choosing the cheapest option that would still look decent. Everything in this house told the story of careful choices, of sacrificing the wants for the needs, of building slowly toward a future that felt secure. We weren't wealthy people, but we were proud of what we'd accumulated through decades of discipline and hard work. I heard the familiar creak of Robert's footsteps on the stairs, followed by the sound of the coffee machine gurgling to life. He appeared in the doorway wearing his favorite threadbare robe, his gray hair sticking up at impossible angles, looking every bit the retired factory worker he was. For 40 years he'd gotten up before dawn to work the early shift, his hands growing more weathered with each passing season, all so we could save a little extra each month. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head as he reached for his favorite mug. "You're up early. Everything all right?" I looked up at him, at the man who'd never once questioned my judgment about money, who'd trusted me to make the right decisions for our family's future. The words stuck in my throat like shards of glass. How do you tell someone that their child has stolen their dreams? "Sit down, Robert," I said quietly, gathering the statements into a neat pile. "We need to talk." The color drained from his face as I explained what I'd discovered. He listened without interruption, his weathered hands gripping his coffee mug so tightly I thought it might shatter. When I finished, the silence stretched between us like an abyss, broken only by the tick of the wall clock and the distant hum of morning traffic. "There has to be an explanation," he finally whispered, though his voice carried no conviction. "Michael wouldn't do this to us. Not our Michael." But even as he said it, I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. We both remembered the phone calls over the past 6 months, Michael's voice tight with an excitement that felt different from his usual enthusiasm. He'd talked about cryptocurrency investments, about opportunities that could change everything, about making money work harder instead of letting it sit in boring savings accounts. We'd listened politely, the way parents do when their adult children share interests they don't quite understand. Robert had made jokes about funny money and imaginary coins, while I'd worried quietly about get-rich-quick schemes. But we'd never imagined that Michael would take matters into his own hands, would use his power of attorney to access our accounts without permission. The power of attorney had seemed like such a sensible precaution when we'd signed it 2 years ago. Michael was our only child, responsible and trustworthy, and we'd wanted to ensure someone could handle our affairs if we became unable to do so. The lawyer had explained it carefully, emphasizing that it was meant for emergencies, for situations where we couldn't make decisions for ourselves. It was supposed to be a safety net, not a doorway for theft. I picked up the phone 3 times before I finally found the courage to dial Michael's number. Each ring felt like an eternity, my heart hammering against my ribs as I practiced what I would say. How do you confront your own child about stealing from you? How do you ask the person you raised to explain why they'd betrayed your trust so completely? Mom, perfect timing. Michael's voice was bright, almost manic with enthusiasm. I was just about to call you. You're not going to believe what's happening with my investments. The portfolio is absolutely exploding right now. Michael. I kept my voice steady, though my hands were trembling. I need you to explain something to me. I'm looking at our bank statements, and our savings accounts are empty. The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost hear him calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much he could explain away. Mom, listen, he finally said, and I could hear that tone creeping into his voice, the same condescending patience he'd used as a teenager when he thought we were being unreasonable. I know it looks scary, but this is actually the best thing that could have happened to your money. Do you have any idea how much you were losing to inflation just letting it sit there? You stole from us. The words came out flat, factual, stripped of emotion. I didn't steal anything, he protested, his voice rising. I'm your son. I have power of attorney. I'm managing your investments more aggressively because you were too conservative to see the opportunities. This money is going to triple, maybe quadruple in value. You'll thank me when you see the returns. I closed my eyes, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. This wasn't the voice of a son who'd made a mistake and felt remorse. This was the voice of someone who'd convinced himself that theft was actually a favor. That money was our retirement, Michael, our security. You had no right to touch it without asking us. Mom, you're being dramatic. This isn't some scam. I've done my research. I've been studying the markets for months. Cryptocurrency is the future, and if we don't get in now, we'll miss the biggest wealth transfer in history. I wanted to scream, to demand he put every penny back immediately, to threaten him with police and lawyers and consequences. But instead, I found myself thinking about Emma, his 12-year-old daughter, who was probably getting ready for school right now, completely unaware that her father had just destroyed her grandparents' future. We want our money back, Michael, all of it, today. He laughed, actually laughed, as if I'd said something amusing. Mom, that's not how investments work. The money isn't just sitting in some account waiting to be withdrawn. It's working. It's growing. Even if I wanted to liquidate everything right now, which would be financial suicide, there are processes, waiting periods, tax implications you haven't considered. Then figure it out, I said quietly. Because if you don't, we'll be forced to explore other options. Other options? What's that supposed to mean? It means we'll report the unauthorized use of our accounts to the bank and the police. The line went quiet again, and when Michael spoke, his voice had shifted into something harder, more defensive. You're threatening to have your own son arrested? Over money I'm trying to multiply for you. Do you have any idea how that makes you sound? The accusation hit like a slap. Here I was, the victim of his betrayal, and somehow he was making me feel guilty for being upset about it. It was a familiar dance, one we'd performed throughout his adolescence whenever he'd been caught in wrongdoing. Somehow, his mistakes always became our overreactions. I'm protecting what's left of our relationship, I said, but I won't let you bankrupt us in the name of helping us. Fine, he said, his voice tight with anger. If that's how you want to play this, we'll talk when you've calmed down and can think rationally about what's best for everyone. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. In the space of 10 minutes, my son had gone from excitement about his investments to hanging up on me when I dared to object to his theft of our life savings. Robert was standing in the doorway, having heard enough of the conversation to understand how it had gone. His face looked older somehow, as if the reality of our situation had aged him in real time. What do we do now? He asked quietly. I looked around our modest kitchen, at the appliances we'd carefully maintained for decades, at the small table where we'd shared thousands of meals and planned our future. We'd assumed we had enough saved to live comfortably in our final years, to maybe take a small vacation or help with Emma's education. Now we were staring at the possibility of having to sell our home, of becoming financial burdens on our family instead of contributors to their well-being. We fight, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. We don't let him get away with this. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls and appointments. The bank was sympathetic, but clear about their limitations. Since Michael had legitimate power of attorney, and the withdrawals hadn't exceeded the daily limits, they couldn't classify it as unauthorized access. The police were polite, but explained that financial disputes between family members with legal documentation were civil matters, not criminal ones. Our lawyer, a kind man in his 60s who'd handled our wills and the power of attorney documents, looked genuinely pained as he explained our options. We could revoke the power of attorney immediately, which we did, but getting the money back would require a lengthy legal battle that could cost more than we could recover. The problem, he explained, is that Michael will argue he was acting in your best interests, making investment decisions on your behalf. Even if the court disagrees, proving financial damages from investment decisions is complicated when the investments are still active. I left his office feeling defeated, carrying a stack of legal documents that seemed to mock our naivete. We'd tried to be responsible, to plan for the worst-case scenario, and instead, we'd handed our son the keys to our financial destruction. It was Emma who changed everything. She appeared at our door that Saturday morning, her bicycle abandoned on our front lawn, her backpack still strapped to her shoulders. At 12, she was all elbows and knees, her dark hair perpetually escaping whatever attempt had been made to tame it. She had her father's eyes but her grandmother's stubborn chin, and right now both were focused on me with an intensity that was unsettling. "Grandma Ruth, I need to talk to you," she said, pushing past me into the living room. "It's about Dad and the money." My heart clenched. "Emma, sweetheart, that's not something you need to worry about. It's between your father and us." "No, it's not," she said firmly, dropping her backpack on our coffee table with a thud. "Because I heard him talking to Mom about it. He said you were being unreasonable and that you'd thank him later when you were rich. But Grandma, you don't look like someone who's about to be rich. You look scared." The perceptiveness of children never ceased to amaze me. Here was this 12-year-old girl who could see through her father's justifications more clearly than the adults around her. "I am scared," I admitted, sitting down beside her on the couch. "Your grandfather and I worked very hard to save that money, and now it's gone." Emma nodded gravely, as if I'd confirmed something she already suspected. "Dad's been..."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
"Acting weird lately. He keeps checking his phone and talking about numbers going up and down. Mom says he's obsessed with his investments." She made air quotes around the word, clearly mimicking something she'd heard. "Sometimes adults make mistakes with money," I said carefully, not wanting to put her in the middle of our conflict. "This isn't a mistake," Emma said with startling certainty. "Mistakes are when you forget to carry the one in math class. This is when you take something that doesn't belong to you because you think you know better than everyone else." The clarity of her assessment was both heartening and heartbreaking. At 12, she understood concepts of ownership and consent that her father seemed to have forgotten. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know, sweetheart. The lawyers say it's complicated because your dad had permission to access our accounts." Emma frowned, her young face scrunched in concentration. "But he didn't have permission to take all of it, right? Just to help if you got sick or something?" "That's right." "So he broke the rules, even if he had permission to be in the game." I stared at her, struck by the simple logic of her analogy. "That's exactly right." Emma was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a determination that reminded me of myself at her age. "I have an idea," she said. "But you have to promise not to tell Dad it came from me. Emma, I don't want you getting involved in this. It's not your responsibility to fix what your father broke." "But it is," she insisted. "Because if you and Grandpa Robert don't have money for retirement, who's going to take care of you? My parents? They can't even manage their own money right now with Dad buying stupid internet coins all the time." The wisdom coming from this child was staggering, and I felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness that she felt responsible for the adults in her life. "What's your idea?" I asked. Emma unzipped her backpack and pulled out a tablet, swiping through screens with the casual expertise of her generation. "Dad thinks he's so smart about technology, but he's not as careful as he thinks he is. He leaves his crypto wallet app open all the time, and I know his password because he uses the same one for everything. I felt a chill of recognition. Michael had always been careless with passwords, using our family dog's name and his birth year for everything from email accounts to streaming services. Emma, what are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything bad, she said quickly. But what if there was a way to show him how it feels to have someone else make decisions about his money without asking? The idea was audacious and concerning in equal measure. Sweetheart, I appreciate that you want to help, but I can't let you do anything that might get you in trouble. What if it wasn't illegal? Emma pressed. What if it was just using his own rules against him? He says he's managing investments for the family, right? What if the family started managing some of his investments? I stared at this remarkable child, this 12-year-old who was proposing something that sounded dangerously close to poetic justice. Part of me was appalled at the idea of involving her in what amounted to financial retaliation. But another part of me, the part that had been burning with righteous anger for days, was intrigued by the possibility of giving Michael a taste of his own medicine. Tell me more about this idea, I said carefully. Emma's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of a child who'd been given permission to be cleverly mischievous. Okay, so Dad has all his cryptocurrency in different wallets, right? And he's always bragging about how much they're worth and how smart he is for buying them. But what if some of those cryptocurrencies suddenly got donated to charity? Like automatically, through those smart contracts he's always talking about. Donated to charity? Yeah! There are ways to set up automatic donations based on certain conditions. It's like programming the money to do good things. And since Dad's always saying the money belongs to the whole family anyway, wouldn't it make sense for the family to have a say in how some of it gets used? The plan was becoming clearer, and I had to admire its elegant simplicity. Michael had justified his theft by claiming he was managing family money more effectively. Emma was proposing to use that same logic to redirect some of his profits toward charitable causes. How would you even know how to do something like that? I asked. Emma grinned, looking every bit the precocious child she was. Coding camp last summer, plus YouTube tutorials. Dad's not the only one in the family who can learn about cryptocurrency. The difference is, I learned about the technology to solve problems, not just to make money. Over the next hour, Emma walked me through the basics of cryptocurrency wallets, smart contracts, and automated transactions. Her technical knowledge was impressive, but what struck me more was her moral clarity. She wasn't proposing this out of spite or revenge, but from a genuine belief that her father needed to understand the consequences of making unilateral decisions about other people's money. The charities would be ones that help old people, she explained, like organizations that provide meals or help with medical bills. So it's not like the money would be wasted. It would be going to people who need it, just like you and Grandpa Robert need your savings back. The irony was perfect. Michael's unauthorized investment of our retirement funds would generate donations to help other retirees in need. And how much money are we talking about? I asked. Emma consulted her tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be detailed research she'd conducted on her father's various cryptocurrency holdings. Well, based on what I can see, Dad has made some money on the investments. Not as much as he's been bragging about, but some. I was thinking maybe we could set it up so that any profits over a certain amount automatically get donated. That way, he keeps his original investment plus a reasonable return, but the excessive profits go to help people. The plan was becoming more sophisticated by the minute, and I found myself genuinely impressed by Emma's combination of technical skill and ethical reasoning. But Emma, even if this is technically possible, it still feels like we'd be taking his money without permission. Isn't that the same thing he did to us? Emma considered this seriously. Her brow furrowed in concentration. I don't think it's the same, she said finally. Dad took money that wasn't his, and didn't belong to him to take. This would be using money that he made with your money, money that wouldn't exist if he hadn't stolen from you in the first place. Plus, we'd be giving it to people who actually need help, not just trying to get richer. The moral distinctions were subtle but real, and I found myself nodding along with her reasoning. This wasn't about revenge or retaliation. It was about justice and accountability. There's something else, Emma added quietly. I think Dad needs to learn what it feels like to have someone else make decisions about his money. Maybe if he experiences it himself, he'll understand why what he did to you was wrong. The wisdom of this child continued to astound me. She understood something that her father seemed to have forgotten, that empathy requires experience, and sometimes the only way to teach someone about consequences is to let them face those consequences themselves. Would you really know how to do this safely? I asked. Without getting caught or getting in trouble? Emma nodded confidently. The whole point of cryptocurrency is that transactions are anonymous and automatic. Once a smart contract is set up, it runs itself based on the conditions you programmed. No one has to actively do anything after it's created. And the charities would actually receive the money? Oh yes, that part's easy. There are lots of legitimate organizations that accept cryptocurrency donations. I already looked up a few that help seniors with financial hardship. The money would go directly to them, completely legally. I sat back on the couch, my mind reeling with the implications of what Emma was proposing. It was audacious, technically complex, and ethically ambiguous. It was also possibly the most appropriate response to Michael's betrayal that anyone had suggested. I need to think about this, I said finally, and I need to talk to your grandfather about it. Emma nodded, understanding. Just remember, Grandma, Dad's been making decisions about your money for weeks without asking you. Maybe it's time someone made decisions about his money without asking him. That evening, after Emma had biked home, I sat with Robert on our back porch, watching the sun set behind the neighbor's fence. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and somewhere in the distance I could hear children playing in their yards, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. I told him about Emma's visit and her proposal, watching his weathered face carefully for signs of his reaction. Robert had always been a man of simple moral principles. Work hard, treat people fairly, and face the consequences of your actions. What Michael had done violated all of those principles. That little girl has more sense than her father, he said quietly when I finished explaining, and more courage than most adults. But is it right? I asked. Are we teaching her that two wrongs make a right? Robert was quiet for a long time, his gnarled hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of 7 decades of hard-earned wisdom. Ruth, I've been thinking about this situation for days, and I keep coming back to the same question. What's the difference between justice and revenge? I don't know, I admitted. I think, he said slowly, justice is about making things right, about restoring balance. Revenge is about making someone suffer for the sake of suffering. Emma's idea isn't about making Michael suffer. It's about using the money he made with our stolen savings to help other people in our situation. He paused, taking a sip of his cold coffee and making a face. And maybe, just maybe, it's about teaching him what it feels like to have someone else make financial decisions for you without your permission. So you think we should do it? I think, Robert said carefully, we should let Emma do it. With our blessing and our guidance, but as her project. She's the one who came up with the idea, she's the one with the technical skills, and she's the one who'll have to live with her father's actions for the rest of her life. Maybe this is her way of standing up for what's right. The next morning, I called Emma and asked her to come back over. She arrived within 20 minutes, clearly having been waiting for my call. Grandma Ruth, did you decide? Your grandfather and I talked about it, I said, sitting down across from her at the kitchen table. We think your idea has merit, but we have conditions. Emma leaned forward eagerly. What conditions? First, we researched the charities together to make sure they're legitimate and effective. Second, we set a reasonable limit on how much gets donated so your father doesn't lose everything. Third, if this backfires and causes problems, you come to us immediately. And fourth, Robert added, joining us at the table, you promise us that you're doing this because it's the right thing to do, not because you're angry at your father. Emma considered all of this seriously, then nodded. I promise. And Grandma Ruth? I want to add one more condition of my own. What's that? I want to tell Dad what I did after it's over. Not right away, but eventually. I want him to know that his own daughter figured out how to use his technology to help people he hurt. Maybe that will make him think twice before he takes advantage of family again. The plan took 2 weeks to implement. Emma came over every afternoon after school, turning our dining room into a makeshift command center with her laptop, tablet, and notebooks filled with research about cryptocurrency protocols and charitable organizations. I marveled at her dedication and attention to detail, the way she approached this project with the same methodical care Robert had once brought to his work at the factory. We settled on 3 charities: a local organization that provided meals to homebound seniors, a national group that helped elderly people pay for prescription medications, and a financial assistance program for retirees facing foreclosure. Emma verified their legitimacy through multiple sources and confirmed that they all accepted cryptocurrency donations. The technical implementation was beyond my understanding, but Emma explained each step with patient enthusiasm. She showed me how smart contracts worked, how they could be programmed to automatically execute transactions when certain conditions were met, and how the blockchain recorded everything in a permanent, unchangeable ledger. "It's actually pretty simple once you understand the basics," she said, fingers flying over her keyboard. "I'm creating a contract that monitors Dad's wallet balances and automatically donates a percentage of any gains above a certain threshold. So if his investments go up, some of the profits automatically go to charity. And he won't be able to trace this back to you? Not easily. That's the beauty of cryptocurrency. The transactions are all recorded, but they're pseudonymous. He'll see that donations were made, but he won't know who authorized them unless he's a much better detective than he is an investor." On the day we implemented the plan, I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation that reminded me of childhood pranks, except this prank had the potential to help dozens of elderly people in need. Emma double-checked everything one final time, then looked at me with the solemnity of someone about to perform surgery. "Are you ready, Grandma Ruth?" I thought about our empty savings accounts, about the dismissive way Michael had laughed off my concerns, about the sleepless nights I'd spent worrying about our future. I thought about all the other elderly people who might be facing similar betrayals from family members they'd trusted. "I'm ready." Emma clicked the final button, and just like that, the smart contract was active and deployed to the blockchain. According to her calculations, if Michael's investments continued to perform as they had been, the first charitable donations would be triggered within a few days. "Now we wait," she said, closing her laptop with a satisfied smile. We didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. Michael's name appeared on the screen, and even before I answered, I could guess why he was calling. "Mom, something weird is happening with my accounts," he said without preamble. "Money keeps disappearing from my wallets. Not all of it, but enough to notice. I think I might be getting hacked." "That's terrible," I said, managing to keep my voice neutral. "Have you contacted the cryptocurrency exchange?" "That's just it. The transactions look legitimate. They're going to registered charities, but I never authorized them. It's like someone is using my money to make donations without asking me." The irony was so perfect I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. How frustrating that must be, having someone make financial decisions with your money without your permission. Exactly. It's theft, plain and simple. I'm going to contact the FBI if I have to. You can't just take someone's money and give it away, even if it's going to charity. "No," I agreed quietly. "You really can't just take someone's money and give it away without their permission." There was a long pause on the line, and I wondered if he was beginning to understand the parallel between his situation and ours. "Mom, you don't think this is connected to our disagreement about your retirement funds, do you?" "I don't know what you mean." "I mean, you were pretty upset about the investment decisions I made. You didn't hire someone to hack my accounts as some kind of revenge, did you?" The accusation stung, even though it wasn't entirely wrong. "Michael, I'm a 70-year-old woman who barely knows how to use email. Do you really think I'm capable of hacking cryptocurrency wallets?" "Well, no, but maybe you hired someone. There are people who specialize in this kind of thing. The same way there are people who specialize in unauthorized investment management?" I asked pointedly. Another pause, longer this time. "That's different, Mom. I'm your son. I was trying to help you. And whoever is donating your cryptocurrency profits to charity is probably trying to help elderly people who need financial assistance. Maybe they think they're doing a good thing with money that wouldn't exist if you hadn't taken it from someone else in the first place. This is not the same thing, isn't it? Someone with access to your accounts is making financial decisions they think are in your best interest, or at least in the best interest of people who need help. They're using your money to support causes they believe in, without asking your permission first. How is that different from what you did to us? I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line, and I imagined him pacing around his house the way he used to do as a teenager when he was trying to talk his way out of trouble. Because it's my money, he finally exploded. I earned it. You earned it with our money, Michael. Money you took without permission. Money we saved for 47 years to secure our future. How much of those profits would exist if you hadn't stolen our life savings to begin with? The question hung in the air between us, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, Michael seemed to have no ready answer. I want our money back, I said quietly. All of it. And I want it back now. Mom, I told you, it doesn't work that way. The markets fluctuate. Some of the positions are locked in for specific time periods. There are tax implications to consider. Then you'd better figure it out, I said. Because every day you delay, more of your profits are going to mysteriously disappear to charity. And unlike your investment strategy, this philanthropic approach seems to be working exactly as designed. I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Emma had been right. There was something deeply satisfying about using Michael's own logic against him. Over the next week, the donations continued automatically, just as Emma had programmed them to do. Each day brought new automated contributions to the 3 charities we'd selected, funded by the profits from Michael's cryptocurrency investments. The beauty of the smart contract was that it required no ongoing intervention from us. It simply executed its programming with mechanical precision. Michael called twice more, each time sounding more frustrated and confused. He'd consulted with cybersecurity experts and blockchain analysts, but none of them could explain how someone was accessing his accounts to make unauthorized donations. The transactions were technically legitimate, properly formatted and cryptographically signed, but he insisted he hadn't authorized them. It's like my money has developed a conscience, he complained during his 3rd call. Every time I make a profit, a chunk of it automatically goes to help old people. What a terrible problem to have, I said dryly. Imagine being forced to help elderly people who are struggling financially. You're not taking this seriously, he protested. This is a violation of my financial privacy. Someone is stealing from me. And how do you think your grandfather and I felt when we discovered our accounts had been emptied? Do you think we felt like our financial privacy had been respected? That was different. How? Because I'm family. Because I was trying to help. Because the money is growing instead of just sitting there doing nothing. And the money that's being donated from your accounts is helping people instead of just sitting there making you richer. Doesn't that seem like a worthwhile use of profits that were generated with stolen funds? I could hear him struggling with the comparison, trying to find a way to distinguish between his actions and the mysterious charitable donations that were reducing his cryptocurrency profits. Mom, if you're behind this somehow, you need to stop it. This is illegal. Is it? Are you planning to report it to the police? I might. Good, I said. When you do, make sure to mention that the donations started shortly after you liquidated your parents' retirement savings without their permission. I'm sure they'll find the timing very interesting. The line went quiet, and I could practically hear him calculating the risks of involving law enforcement in a situation where his own actions wouldn't bear scrutiny. What do you want? He asked finally. I want our money back. I've wanted that from the beginning. And if I figure out how to return your original investment, will you stop whoever is doing this to my accounts? It was the first time he'd offered any concrete steps toward making things right, and I felt a surge of hope that maybe, finally, he was beginning to understand the seriousness of what he'd done. I want all of it back, Michael, every penny. Not just the original amount, but every dollar you've made using our money. We're not partners in your investment scheme. We're the victims of your theft. That's not realistic, Mom. Some of the profits have already been donated to your charities. My charities? I thought you said you didn't know who was making those donations. I'd caught him in his assumption, and we both knew it. The silence stretched between us, loaded with implications. "However much is left," I said finally, "we want it back, and we want you to promise never to access our accounts again, for any reason, without our explicit written permission." "Fine," he said, his voice tight with defeat. "I'll see what I can do." 2 days later, Emma appeared at our door with her laptop and a grin that could have powered our entire neighborhood. "Grandma Ruth, you need to see this," she said, setting up her computer on the kitchen table. "Dad's been busy." She pulled up several screens showing cryptocurrency transactions, bank transfers, and what appeared to be a very complicated series of financial maneuvers. "He's been liquidating positions all morning," Emma explained, "converting cryptocurrency back to regular money and moving it around between different accounts. I think he's actually going to give you your money back." I stared at the numbers on the screen, afraid to believe what I was seeing. "All of it?" "Not all of it," Emma admitted. "Some of the profits did go to charity, just like we planned. But most of it is being converted back to cash." "And Grandma Ruth?" "He's moving it into an account with just your name on it. No power of attorney, no joint access, just yours." The implications hit me like a wave of relief and vindication. Michael wasn't just returning our money. He was ensuring that he'd never be able to access it again without our permission. "How much went to charity?" I asked. Emma consulted her notes, scrolling through transaction records, with the efficiency of someone who'd been tracking every detail. "About $12,000 total, spread across the 3 organizations we picked. That's money that's already helping elderly people pay for food, medicine, and housing assistance. $12,000. It was more than we'd ever been able to donate to charity in a single year. Money that would make a real difference in the lives of people who were facing the same financial uncertainty that Michael had forced upon us." The irony was profound and satisfying in ways I hadn't expected. "There's something else," Emma said, minimizing one window and opening another. "Dad doesn't know it yet, but the smart contract is still active. It's programmed to keep making donations as long as he continues trading with cryptocurrency. So if he tries to rebuild his portfolio using the money he's returning to you, well..." She trailed off with a mischievous smile. "You mean it will keep donating his profits to charity?" "Exactly. The contract doesn't care where the money comes from originally. It just monitors the wallet addresses for gains above the threshold we set. As long as he's using those wallets, any significant profits will automatically trigger donations." The elegance of the solution was breathtaking. Michael could have his original investment back, he could continue playing the cryptocurrency markets if he chose, but he would never again be able to profit from stolen money without sharing those profits with people who actually needed help. "Emma, you've created something remarkable here. Not just the technical achievement, but the moral framework behind it." She blushed at the compliment, but maintained her serious expression. "I keep thinking about what you said, about how Dad took money that belonged to your future. Well, now his future profits belong partly to other people's present needs. It seems fair." That afternoon, I received a call from our bank confirming that a substantial deposit had been made to our savings account. The amount was close to our original balance, though not quite complete. When I called Michael to acknowledge the transfer, his voice was subdued in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child caught in serious misbehavior. "I've returned what I could," he said without his usual defensiveness. "Some of the original investment is still tied up in positions I can't liquidate immediately, but this should cover most of what I took." "Most of what you stole," I corrected gently. He didn't argue with the terminology this time. "Yes, most of what I stole." The admission felt like a small victory, the first crack in the wall of justification he'd built around his actions. For weeks, he'd insisted that he was managing our investments, helping us, acting in our best interests. Now, finally, he was acknowledging the truth of what he'd done. "Michael, I need you to understand something," I said. "This isn't just about the money, it's about trust. It's about respect. It's about the fact that you made a decision that could have left your grandfather and me destitute, and you made it without even asking us." "I know," he said quietly. "I thought I was being smart. I thought I could multiply your money and give you back more than you started with. I got caught up in the potential returns and forgot about the risks." "You forgot about us," I said. "You forgot that this wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was our security, our peace of mind, our ability to take care of ourselves as we get older." The silence that followed was heavy with years of accumulated hurt, not just from this incident, but from the gradual erosion of our relationship that had led to it. Michael had been drifting away from us emotionally long before he'd stolen our money, treating us more like obligations than family, more like burdens than the people who'd raised and supported him. "I want to make this right," he said eventually. "Not just the money, but everything. I want to fix what I've broken between us. That's going to take time, Michael. And it's going to take more than words. It's going to require you to understand why what you did was so devastating, and to make changes so it never happens again." "The donations," he said suddenly. "The mysterious charitable donations from my accounts. That's connected to this somehow, isn't it?" I hesitated, thinking about Emma's request to eventually tell her father what she'd done. "What makes you think that?" "The timing. The fact that it started right after our first argument about your money. The fact that the donations are going to organizations that help elderly people. It's too much of a coincidence." "And how would that make you feel if the donations were connected to our situation?" "Honestly, at first I was angry. I felt like someone was stealing from me, taking my money without permission and giving it away to causes they thought were important." He paused, and I could hear him processing his own words. "But then I realized that's exactly what I did to you." The parallel was finally penetrating, and I felt a surge of hope that maybe this ordeal had taught him something valuable about empathy and consequences. "The difference," I said carefully, "is that the money being donated was earned using our stolen savings. In a way, those donations are just redirecting profits that never should have existed in the first place. So you are behind it." I didn't say that. I said the donations make moral sense, regardless of who authorized them. Michael was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a different quality, less defensive and more thoughtful. "Mom, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. If you could stop the donations, would you?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about the reports I'd been receiving from the 3 charities Emma had selected, about the meals being provided to homebound seniors, the prescription medications being purchased for people who couldn't afford them, the assistance being given to elderly couples facing foreclosure. I thought about the thank you letters the organizations had forwarded to the anonymous donor, letters filled with gratitude from people whose lives had been improved by Michael's reluctant generosity. "No," I said finally. "I don't think I would stop them. Those donations are helping people who are in situations similar to the one you put us in. They're using money that was generated through theft to help victims of financial vulnerability. It's the most appropriate use of those profits I can imagine. Even though it's technically my money, is it really your money, Michael? If you steal $100 from someone and invest it to make a $10 profit, do you really own that profit? Or does it belong to the person you stole from originally?" The philosophical question hung between us, and I could tell he was struggling with its implications. Michael had always been intelligent, but his intelligence had been focused on finding opportunities and maximizing returns, not on grappling with ethical complexities. "I need to think about all of this," he said finally. "About what I did, about the consequences, about what it means to make things right." "Good," I said. "Thinking is the first step toward understanding. And understanding is the first step toward change." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of our living room, feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks: peace. Not complete resolution, not perfect justice, but a sense that balance was slowly being restored. Our money was coming back. Michael was beginning to understand the gravity of his actions, and his profits were helping people who needed assistance. Emma's plan had worked better than any of us had imagined. That evening, Emma called to update me on the latest developments. "Grandma Ruth, Dad's been doing research," she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. I checked his browser history on the family computer, and he's been reading about the charities that have been receiving donations. He's been looking up their programs, their effectiveness ratings, their financial transparency reports. He's investigating the organizations. More than that, he's learning about them. He spent 2 hours reading testimonials from people who've been helped by the meal delivery program. He looked up statistics about prescription drug costs for seniors. He's been educating himself about the problems these organizations are trying to solve. The image of Michael researching the charities that were receiving his reluctant donations was both amusing and encouraging. Perhaps being forced to fund these organizations was teaching him about needs and challenges he'd never considered before. Has he figured out that you're behind the smart contract? I don't think so. He's been asking Mom and me questions about cryptocurrency security, but I think he still assumes it's some kind of sophisticated hacking operation. Which technically it is. Just not the kind he's imagining. When are you going to tell him the truth? Emma was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her thinking through the implications. I want to wait until he's fully processed everything. Until he really understands what he did to you and Grandpa Robert. I think the revelation will be more meaningful if he comes to the right conclusions first, before he learns that his 12-year-old daughter outsmarted him. The wisdom in her approach impressed me. Emma understood something that many adults miss, that learning requires readiness, and that the most powerful lessons come from self-discovery rather than external instruction. There's something else I want to tell you, Emma continued. I've been keeping track of all the donations, and I want to write a report about where the money went and how it was used. I think Dad should see the actual impact of the charitable giving, not just the dollar amounts. That sounds like a wonderful project. And Grandma Ruth? I want to keep the smart contract running, even after Dad knows I created it, not to punish him, but to make sure that if he ever profits from bad decisions again, at least some good will come from it automatically. The idea of a permanent ethical safeguard built into Michael's financial activities was both innovative and appropriate. Emma was essentially creating a technological conscience for her father, a system that would ensure his future profits contributed to positive social impact, whether he wanted them to or not. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Michael's transformation with a mixture of amazement and cautious optimism. He called more frequently, not to complain about the mysterious donations, but to share what he was learning about the issues facing elderly Americans. He told me about articles he'd read about seniors choosing between food and medication, about elderly couples losing their homes to medical debt, about the inadequacy of social safety nets for people who'd worked their entire lives. Mom, I had no idea how many older people are struggling financially, he said during one of our conversations. I always assumed that if you'd worked and saved your whole life, you'd be secure in retirement. Most people are one major illness or financial betrayal away from losing everything, I told him. That's why what you did to us was so devastating. You didn't just take our money. You took our security. I'm beginning to understand that. And I'm beginning to understand why the donations from my accounts make sense. The money is going to people who are facing the same vulnerabilities I created for you. The evolution in his thinking was remarkable. The man who dismissed my concerns about our stolen savings as overreaction was now educating himself about financial vulnerability and expressing genuine empathy for people in similar situations. Michael, I said carefully, I want you to know that your grandfather and I are proud of the research you've been doing, the learning you've undertaken. It shows that you're capable of growth and change. It's been eye-opening, he admitted. I've been so focused on making money, on maximizing returns, that I lost sight of what money is actually for. It's supposed to provide security, to enable people to take care of themselves and their families. When you use it to gamble with other people's futures, you're perverting its purpose. The insight was profound and suggested that Michael was developing a more mature understanding of financial responsibility. The forced charitable giving had accomplished something that no amount of lecturing or arguing could have achieved. It had made him confront the human impact of his actions. 3 weeks after Emma had implemented her smart contract, Michael called with an unexpected proposal. Mom, I want to do something, and I want you to hear me out before you respond. I'm listening. I want to increase the charitable donations. Voluntarily. I've been reading about these organizations, and they're doing incredible work with limited resources. I want to set up regular monthly donations from my investment profits, not because I'm being forced to, but because it's the right thing to do. The request was so unexpected that I found myself speechless. This was the same man who'd stolen our life savings without permission, who'd dismissed our concerns about financial security, who'd insisted that his investment decisions were purely beneficial. Now he was volunteering to give away more of his profits to help strangers in need. "Are you sure about this, Michael?" "I'm more sure about this than I've been about anything in months. I realize now that I've been treating money like a game, like a way to keep score. But it's not a game. It's a tool for creating security and opportunity. And when you have more than you need, the right thing to do is share it with people who don't have enough." "What does Jenna think about this idea?" Michael laughed, but it was a rueful sound rather than a bitter one. "She thinks I've lost my mind. She says we should be focused on building our own wealth, not giving it away. But I think that's exactly the kind of thinking that got me into trouble in the first place." The comment suggested that Michael was beginning to understand how his relationship with money had been shaped by attitudes and priorities that weren't necessarily healthy or sustainable. "The marriage is struggling, isn't it?" "We're in counseling," he admitted. "Jenna's having a hard time accepting that I made such a massive error in judgment with your savings. She's also not happy about the mysterious donations that keep reducing our investment returns. But mostly, she's upset that I'm changing, that I'm questioning decisions and priorities we used to agree on." "Change is difficult for everyone involved," I said gently. "But sometimes it's necessary for growth." "I know. And I'd rather lose a marriage built on the wrong values than lose my relationship with my family, because I was too selfish to learn from my mistakes." The statement revealed a level of self-awareness and prioritization that gave me hope for Michael's future, regardless of what happened with his marriage. He was finally understanding that relationships based on mutual respect and shared values were more important than financial partnerships built on greed and exploitation. "There's something else," Michael continued. "I want to arrange a meeting. You, me, Dad, and Emma. I want to apologize properly, not just for taking your money, but for the way I've been treating all of you for years. I want to acknowledge what I've done and make commitments about how I'm going to do better. Emma specifically, especially Emma. I've been a terrible example for her, showing her that adults lie and steal and justify bad behavior when it's convenient. She deserves better from her father." The inclusion of Emma in his planned apology was significant, and I wondered if he was beginning to suspect her role in the charitable donation scheme. Either way, his recognition that he owed his daughter an explanation and apology suggested genuine remorse and a commitment to modeling better behavior. "I think a family meeting is a good idea," I said. "But Michael, I want you to understand that forgiveness is a process, not a single conversation. Rebuilding trust is going to take time and consistent action." "I understand. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness. I'm asking for the opportunity to prove that I've learned from this experience, and that I'm committed to being a better son and father." The conversation ended with plans for a family dinner at our house the following Sunday. As I hung up the phone, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Hope tempered by caution, relief mixed with residual hurt, pride in Michael's apparent growth alongside disappointment that it had taken such dramatic consequences to motivate his self-reflection. Emma arrived early that Sunday, ostensibly to help with dinner preparations, but actually to brief me on the latest developments in her ongoing monitoring of her father's financial activities. The voluntary donations started 3 days ago. She reported, pulling up spreadsheets on her tablet that tracked every transaction with meticulous precision. Dad set up automatic transfers to 5 different charities, not just the 3 we originally selected. He's donating about 30% of his investment profits now, which is actually more than the smart contract was taking. Has he figured out that the original donations weren't from hackers? Emma grinned with the satisfaction of someone who'd successfully maintained an elaborate deception. I don't think so, but I think he's getting suspicious. He's been asking a lot of technical questions about cryptocurrency security, and some of his research has been focused on smart contracts and automated transactions. Are you ready to tell him the truth? I think so. I've been practicing what I want to say, how I want to explain why I did it, and what I hoped it would accomplish. And what did you hope it would accomplish? Emma's expression grew serious, and for a moment she looked older than her 12 years. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have someone else make decisions about his money. But more than that, I wanted the money he stole from you to end up helping people instead of just making him richer. And do you think it worked? Better than I hoped. Dad's not just returning your money and donating to charity because he has to. He's actually learning about the problems these organizations solve, and he's choosing to be part of the solution. That's more than I thought was possible when I started this project. Robert joined us in the kitchen, wearing his best shirt and the nervous expression of a man preparing for a difficult conversation. At 72, he'd lived through enough family crises to know that healing required patience, and that some wounds took time to close completely. "How are you feeling about all this?" he asked Emma, who was setting the table with unusual care. "Proud," she said without hesitation. Not just because the plan worked, but because Dad actually changed. When I first heard him talking about stealing your money, I thought he was just selfish and greedy. But now I think he was confused about what money is for, and what it means to be responsible for other people's well-being. The analysis was remarkably mature, and I found myself continually impressed by Emma's ability to see beyond surface behaviors to underlying motivations and needs. Michael arrived precisely on time, carrying a bottle of wine and an envelope that he placed carefully on the kitchen counter. He looked nervous but determined, and I noticed that he made eye contact with each of us in a way that seemed intentional and significant. "Before we eat," he said, "I need to say some things that are long overdue." We gathered in the living room, the four of us arranged in a circle that felt both formal and intimate. Michael remained standing, the envelope in his hands, his posture straight but his expression vulnerable. "I've been thinking about this moment for weeks," he began, trying to figure out how to apologize for something that can't really be undone. "I stole from you, Mom and Dad. I took money you'd saved for 47 years, money that represented your security and your peace of mind, and I gambled with it, without your permission." He paused, looking at each of us in turn, his voice steady but emotional. "I told myself I was helping you, that I was managing your investments more effectively, that you'd thank me when you saw the returns. But those were lies I told myself to justify taking something that didn't belong to me." The admission was more complete and honest than anything he'd said during our phone conversations, and I felt a cautious optimism that perhaps he truly understood the gravity of his actions. "I want you to know that I understand now what I put you through. The fear, the sense of betrayal, the worry about your future. I understand that when you discover someone has stolen your life savings, it doesn't matter if they're family or if they claim to have good intentions. What matters is that your security has been destroyed by someone you trusted." Emma was listening intently, her young face serious and focused. This was the first time she'd heard her father acknowledge the full scope of his wrongdoing, the first time he'd demonstrated genuine understanding of the emotional impact his actions had caused. "I also want to apologize for the way I responded when you confronted me. I was defensive and dismissive. I minimized your concerns, and tried to make you feel unreasonable for being upset about having your money stolen. That was cruel and unfair, and it made an already terrible situation much worse." Michael opened the Ozaktifat envelope and withdrew several documents, placing them on the coffee table where we could all see them. "These are bank statements showing that I've returned every penny I can recover from the cryptocurrency investments, plus interest calculated from the date I first accessed your accounts. Some of the original investment is still tied up in positions that can't be liquidated immediately, but I've taken out a personal loan to cover those amounts so you have your full savings restored now." The gesture was unexpected and meaningful. Rather than asking us to wait for market conditions to improve, Michael had borrowed money to make us whole immediately, accepting full financial responsibility for his gambling with our future. "I've also closed all the cryptocurrency accounts that were connected to your stolen money. I won't be trading with those funds anymore, and I've revoked my own access to your bank accounts permanently." He turned to Emma, and his expression grew even more serious. "Emma, I need to apologize to you specifically. You shouldn't have had to listen to arguments about money problems that I created. You shouldn't have had to worry about your grandparents, financial security, because your father made reckless decisions. And you shouldn't have had to see me lie and make excuses instead of taking responsibility for my actions." Emma nodded gravely, accepting the apology with the solemnity of someone who understood its importance. "I want you to know that I'm getting help." I'm working with a counselor who specializes in financial behavior, and I'm learning about the psychological factors that led me to make such poor decisions. I'm also volunteering with one of the organizations that helps elderly people with financial difficulties, because I want to understand the real-world impact of financial vulnerability. The commitment to professional help and community service suggested that Michael's transformation was more than temporary remorse, that he was taking concrete steps to ensure he didn't repeat his mistakes. Finally, I want you all to know that this experience has taught me something important about family and responsibility. For years, I've been treating our relationship like it was optional, like I could prioritize my own interests, and you'd always be there when I needed you. I took your love and support for granted, and I assumed I could repair any damage with explanations and apologies. He sat down, his formal presentation complete, his vulnerability now fully visible. I understand now that love without respect is meaningless. That trust, once broken, requires consistent action over time to rebuild. That being family doesn't give me the right to hurt you or take advantage of your generosity. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion and possibility. Robert reached over and took my hand, a gesture of solidarity and shared assessment of what we'd just heard. "Thank you," I said finally, "for being honest about what you did and why you did it, for taking concrete steps to make amends, for acknowledging the impact your actions had on all of us." "There's something else," Emma said quietly, and I felt my stomach tighten with anticipation. "Something Dad should know about the charitable donations." Michael turned to her with interest, clearly not expecting his daughter to have information about the mysterious cryptocurrency transactions that had been puzzling him for weeks. "The donations weren't from hackers," Emma said, her voice steady and clear. "They were from a smart contract I created to automatically donate your investment profits to charities that help elderly people." The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, realization, and finally something that might have been pride. "You did that? You figured out how to program automatic donations from my cryptocurrency wallets?" Emma nodded, pulling out her tablet to show him the technical details of what she'd accomplished. "I learned about smart contracts at coding camp, and I researched cryptocurrency protocols online. It took me 2 weeks to build something that would work reliably." Michael stared at the code on her screen, his mouth slightly open in amazement. "Emma, this is incredibly sophisticated. You created conditional logic, wallet monitoring, multi-signature verification. This is professional-level blockchain programming. I wanted you to understand what it felt like to have someone else make decisions about your money," Emma explained. "But I also wanted the money you made with Grandma and Grandpa's savings to help people who were facing the same kind of financial problems you created for them. So every donation, every dollar that went to those charities, that was you? That was me using your own technology and your own logic against you. You said the money belonged to the family and that you were managing it for everyone's benefit, so I programmed it to actually benefit people who needed help." Michael was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of his daughter's elaborate scheme. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with something I hadn't heard in years: genuine respect for another person's moral reasoning. "Emma, what you did was brilliant. Ethically complex, but brilliant. You found a way to hold me accountable for my actions while simultaneously creating positive social impact. Are you mad at me for hacking your accounts? Mad? No impressed? Absolutely. Humbled? Definitely. You saw a problem, developed a solution, and implemented it with technical skill and moral clarity. You did what I should have done from the beginning. You made sure that money served people's actual needs, instead of just feeding someone's greed." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and I realized that Emma's revelation had accomplished something none of us had expected. It had shown Michael exactly what kind of person his daughter was becoming, and it had demonstrated that she'd learned lessons about ethics and responsibility that he himself had missed. "I want to keep the smart contract running," Emma said. "Not to punish you, but to make sure that your future investment profits continue contributing to charitable causes. Think of it as a permanent reminder of what money is really for." Michael nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. I think that's perfect. A technological conscience to keep me honest. He turned to Robert and me, his expression serious again. I know this doesn't erase what I did or immediately restore your trust in me, but I hope it demonstrates that I'm committed to learning from this experience and to being the kind of person who deserves your forgiveness. It's a good start, Robert said quietly. A very good start. As we moved into the dining room for dinner, I felt something shifting in the dynamics of our family. The hurt and betrayal were still there, probably always would be to some degree, but they were balanced now by evidence of growth, accountability, and genuine change. Emma's technological intervention had accomplished something that traditional confrontation never could have achieved. It had forced Michael to experience the consequences of his actions, while simultaneously creating positive outcomes for people in need. The meal that followed was different from any family dinner we'd shared in years. The conversation was honest but not bitter, serious but not heavy. Michael asked thoughtful questions about our retirement plans and our concerns about aging. Emma shared her ideas about using technology to solve social problems. Robert told stories about his factory days and the lessons he'd learned about the value of honest work. For the first time in months, we felt like a family again. Not the same family we'd been before the theft, but something new and possibly stronger. A family that had faced a serious crisis and found a way through it that honored everyone's needs and values. As they prepared to leave that evening, Michael pulled me aside for a private conversation. Mom, I need you to know that the charitable donations are going to continue, probably increase. I've been researching effective giving strategies, and I want to make philanthropy a central part of my financial planning going forward. Because Emma programmed you to? He smiled. Because Emma showed me what my money could accomplish when it's directed toward solving real problems, instead of just accumulating for its own sake. She's 12 years old, and she has a clearer understanding of social responsibility than I had at 35. She's remarkable. She is. And I want to make sure I'm the kind of father she can be proud of, the kind of man who uses his resources and abilities to make the world better, rather than just making himself richer. The commitment felt genuine and sustainable, rooted in personal growth rather than external pressure. As I watched them drive away, Emma waving from the passenger seat, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope for our family's future. That night, as Robert and I sat on our back porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, we reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. That little girl saved us, he said quietly. Not just our money, but our relationship with our son. She saved him too, I replied. She found a way to teach him about consequences and empathy, without destroying him in the process. Do you think he's really changed, or is this just temporary remorse? I considered the question carefully, thinking about the research Michael had done, the voluntary donations he'd initiated, the therapy he'd sought, the way he'd looked at Emma when she revealed her role in the charitable giving scheme. I think he's changed, I said finally. I think Emma showed him something about himself that he didn't like, and he's committed to becoming someone better. And if we're wrong, then the smart contract keeps running, and at least some good comes from whatever mistakes he makes in the future. We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds around us and feeling the peace that comes from surviving a crisis, with your values intact and your family relationships not just preserved but strengthened. The next morning brought an email from one of the charities that had been receiving the mysterious donations. They wanted to thank the anonymous donor for their generous contributions and to provide an update on how the funds were being used. The report included photos of seniors receiving meal deliveries, testimonials from people who'd been able to afford their medications, and statistics about the families who'd received assistance with housing costs. I forwarded the email to Michael with a simple note. This is what your stolen money accomplished. His reply came within minutes. This is what Emma taught me money is really for. Thank you for raising a granddaughter who could see solutions where I could only see opportunities. The exchange felt like a completion of sorts, a final acknowledgement of the lessons learned and the growth achieved through our family's financial and moral crisis. Emma had not only recovered our stolen savings and created meaningful charitable impact, but had also engineered the rehabilitation of her father's character and the restoration of our family relationships. As I printed the charity's report to add to the folder where I kept important family documents, I reflected on the unexpected ways that wisdom can emerge from crisis, and how sometimes the youngest members of a family can teach the most important lessons about what really matters in life. 6 months later, our family gathering felt completely different. Michael arrived with quarterly reports from the 5 charities he now supported regularly. Emma had expanded her coding skills, creating apps for nonprofit organizations. The smart contract continued its quiet work, ensuring ethical giving remained automatic. Trust rebuilt slowly through consistent actions rather than grand gestures. Our restored savings grew modestly in conservative investments we controlled completely. Emma's technological conscience had transformed our son from someone who took without asking into someone who gave without being asked. Sometimes the most profound changes come from the smallest hands wielding the biggest ideas. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.